Hello and welcome to this edition of Point of View. We do thank the station here, Channel 12, for allowing us to come in to your homes this morning. We have a very, very interesting show, and we're going to get right to it. Our guest is a two-part series, this particular show, and our first group of guests is none other than Miss Ashley Henderson. I'm sure you've seen her throughout the city from time to time, discussing the concerns of not only police brutality, but the concerns of our youth here in the city of Chattanooga. And beside Mrs. Henderson, we have none other than Maxine Cousin. And I am so proud to have Max on the show with us today. We've got a short time for this edition of Point of View, so let's get right down to it. Ashley, tell us what's going on in the city.
What's not going on in the city?
Better yet.
Right now there's a major crisis in working class communities of color, in particular black communities, where police from the Chattanooga Police Department have been coming in and terrorizing and brutalizing people. And most people have heard of the Adam Tatum case, the young man who was brutalized recently. It happened last summer by officers Emmer and Cooley, who were let go from the CPD. And so that has sparked a lot of conversations about these isolated incidents. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that this is actually an epidemic that has been happening over decades.
Now, you mentioned epidemic. Now, with the rise of the civil rights movement, the development of the human rights era, we're talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Why are we having these problems today, Ashley?
Right. I mean, I think, the veterans of the civil rights movement always told and taught me that freedom is a constant struggle, that it's always going to be something that we have to stand up for and make sure is installed in our living conditions. And so I think it's not because of any lack of good work on the part of our veterans in the civil rights movement. I think it's just a necessary evil that we're going to have to continue to fight for justice as long as there's injustice in the system. Okay,
now veterans of the civil rights movement. That brings us to the young lady that's sitting beside you, correct. Maxine Cousin. Max, veteran of the civil rights movement, veterans of the human rights movement, veterans of the struggle of black people. You're a veteran. We can go on, and in fact, your credentials can reach outside of this station on into the streets. But since we have you here today, murder at the Chattanooga City Jail.
Right.
We can go back to 1906, murder on the Walnut Street Bridge, and then we can bring it to Ashley, where there was an attempted murder there at the Salvation Army, where I hang out. Max, tell us what's happening.
Well, you know, the system reacts to protect itself in every situation, because we are a group of people who don't believe in. Well, what we believe in it is that once we fight and it's always, we think it's been settled, then we can go home and we don't have to deal with that no more. You know, but just like Ashley said, you know, it's a constant struggle because the system reverts. Exactly. And it learns from people in the struggle how to better protect itself. So it goes back to the same old things it always has been doing. You know, one of the things that's happening across the country now is that about every 36 hours a black person is killed in this country.
The Malcolm X grassroots movement.
Every 36 hours, and then I know you know about the 13-year-old boy that was killed in Brooklyn. So this struggle is an ongoing one. People have to be vigilant, and it's not just happening in Chattanooga.
I understand.
And it has something to do with the fact that we are considered really, we hadn't reached the level of being a human being in the United States, you know what I mean?
Which is what I wanted to come to with my next question for you, Max. Will you ever retire from this struggle of
I've tried to
justice?
retire. I didn't want to be in this.
but circumstances continue to present itself, and what I mean by circumstances, crises for African American people, particularly black males. Well, I have sitting beside me your book, Murder in a Chattanooga Jail. Let's talk about that for just a minute, because I read something, just about everything that I've read in this book was pretty shocking, and it's truthful. I did not think that in 2010 I would be reading about a story of this magnitude in my own hometown. Tell me why this book means so much to you, please.
Because the story of my father's death has never really been told. It's never been told in courts.
Yes.
It's never been told by people who have the knowledge, you know, about all the medical information and the different times he was taken to the hospital, all that stuff, it's never really been told. And even here, this book has been hard to get out to tell the entire story.
Yes.
But a lot of it's my opinion about certain things, my, tirade. I think I got something in there about a tirade, but that's just the outrage that I felt when I knew that, here my father was a man who had to go to Europe and Italy and fight for somebody else's life and come back here to the United States and not be treated like an enemy of the state. And so, and that just goes on and on and on. And just something about that just says, I may not always be with Ashley or Janelle or Jared, but I'm always be fighting this fight.
And the two people that you mentioned are coming up on our next section of the show, and we're happy to have them here as well. This fight, this murder in the Chattanooga City Jail, we could have had another horrible story with the gentleman there at the Salvation Army, Ashley. Is it just a crisis, and this is for you and Max, are we dealing with a crisis in 2013 under the auspices of a black president, finally, of the United States? Is this just a black and white issue, or have blacks actually, better yet, better question. In today's society, we had the two generals, Malcolm X in the North, Martin Luther King in the South, two different plans going towards the same road. If they were here today, which plan would be considered beneficial? Nonviolence, integration, separation, equal opportunities for all. Which path would be the right path for you today? Who actually spoke the truth back then?
Yeah.
Malcolm or Martin?
I mean, I think it's a really pertinent question. I think that for me, those decisions don't get made by individuals; they get made by communities. And so I believe wholeheartedly in the self-determination of people of color and other oppressed people to make the right decisions for their communities. And I think that that's a dialogue that we would need to have, that leaders of the black community should have, and be open and honest about. I think that, Concerned Citizens for Justice is obviously not advocating violence in the streets, right?
Absolutely
like we
not.
don't want our people to get hurt, or anybody else for that matter. But definitely we know that if there was anything like that, it would be nothing but detrimental to us right now in this state. But what we think is that wholeheartedly we need to be out in the streets, making it known that we are not going to allow people to come into our communities, police or otherwise, and destroy us. That's definitely not, we believe in self-preservation. We're definitely not going to let that happen. And so I think through our nonviolent means, through having these mass meetings, through marches, through direct action, we think that we can get the goods and we can really rebuild a city that we want to raise our children and families in.
Now we're working by nonviolent means, but we're actually having to get some humanistic results. Mac, real quickly, we've got about 5 minutes in this particular segment. How difficult was the criminal justice system to deal with?
It's still extremely difficult. They're part of the system now. Remember, they're part of a racist system.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and
a classist
we're not
system.
talking about just calling people names.
Exactly.
And we're talking about using their power against you. And that's what racism really is when you talk about blacks and whites in our society.
So now Ashley mentioned the struggle in the street, the fight that's in the street. It's a nonviolent struggle. It's a nonviolent fight. But can we get to where we need to go just on the streets? Do we have to do something with the criminal justice system? We've got an awful criminal justice system here.
Absolutely.
In the city of Chattanooga,
I
the state of
think
Tennessee.
people need to continue to file human rights complaints with the United Nations, especially black folk, especially in this time, especially with the crisis that we have with the police department. We have a judicial system that does not
Cater
don't
to black
enforce
people,
their own
really.
laws.
Absolutely
It
not.
definitely
They
doesn't
changed them.
cater. In fact, targets
It's-
black people and working class people. And I think that our organization really believes in using all the tactics in our toolbox to be able to build this better city that we're trying to get to, which means lobbying and talking to elected officials and proposing legislation like the Civilian Review Board that we've heard as coming from the West Side Community Association. It includes using direct action in the streets. It involves organizing and door knocking in communities and getting people's stories. We got to use all those tactics in the toolbox if we're actually going to win. And so that's definitely what we're thinking through.
And I'm real glad that you're a fast speaker, Ashley, because we've got about 3 more minutes in this segment, and then we'll bring our other guest on. Will the Concerned Citizens for Justice be able to, say, for example, teach our African American males who are creating, because we can't actually talk about the racist white on black without dealing with the crisis that we've got right now, which is black on black crime. And I titled it Black on Black Crime Enforced by Whites. Our young people right now are in such disarray, and we've got a child's program that's coming on after our show. But I can actually say that these young people are crazy. I can actually put that on there. What is this a result of?
It's
Max?
a result of middle-class black America ignoring our children. Sitting up, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings.
It's mentioned in the book, Max, so
Okay,
we're not saying anything new.
It's a result of us believing that all we have to do is look good and in a 3-piece suit and talk that talk.
Sing and dance.
And not really address the issues that our children have in our communities, having to do with the big thing that people talk about is the lack of father in the home, and that's the big thing.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But you know, a lot of us had that.
Exactly.
I think it's a complicated issue. I think that many of us in Concerned Citizens for Justice believe that poverty is in fact violent, and that until you hit those root causes and remedy those root causes, then of course, like as an angry young black youth who's been known to do stupid things and hang out in hoods and be in wrong places. I definitely understand and empathize with young blacks who feel like this city is not fixable, and who feel like the system is intentionally out to
made
get
it fixable, but just for downtown.
Well, and I mean, how did he make it fixable, right? Like gentrification isn't working for me. And so I think that, you know, I think to like just sort of scoff at all black people that participate in black on black crime as being in gangs is also wrong. To give millions of dollars to organizations that actually aren't led by the people and coming up with the people solutions is not helpful. And I think to just sort of throw back, we hear a lot in the conversation about police brutality and police brutality's connections to white supremacy, that like, oh, you should just be out in the streets teaching black people how not to commit crime. And I think my response is actually we need to stop demonizing those people until we're willing to demonize the institutions that keep them in poverty and lead them to that lifestyle in the first place.
And actually, we'll let you have the last word on this segment. And when we come back, we'll have our other 2 guests. This is Point of View on WDEF. We thank you. And we're back on part 2 of this edition of Point of View. I'm Monty Bell, your moderator. And we have in our studio our second group of guests for Concerned Citizens for Justice. We have to my immediate left, Janelle Jackson. Welcome to the show. And we've got Jared Story. And we welcome you also to our show. We were talking about the book Murder in the Chattanooga City Jail with Maxine Cousin, and also with Ashley Henderson. What part, Janelle, do you play with the Concerned Citizens for Justice? Just give us a brief summary of what you do with it.
Well, I'm an organizer with Concerned Citizens for Justice, and so we essentially do. I'm a community organizer, so I don't really have a specific role myself. Like what needs to be done, I do, and the rest of us do.
Well, now Ashley had mentioned that you guys got started with the case that actually happened in Florida, but there was a march in Georgia. Did I have that right with Trey Martin? Is that?
Kind of. Okay. There were marches really at that time all over the country, and Ashley and a couple of other people decided to organize a march here in Chattanooga because people in Chattanooga were also upset about what happened with Trayvon Martin and the fact that we also have a stand your ground law here.
Oh, we do?
We do.
Wow.
So that could have been here.
Now, just as confused as I look now, I'm going to look just as confused, Jared, when I ask you my question. How did you get involved? And they're talking about racism, all things. Now, you've got to sort of help me out here, Jared.
Well, it's a long story, so I don't want to go into the entire story.
But we've got about 12 minutes. Make it short.
But started with sort of an academic interest in civil rights and human rights. I was a history major in school.
Did you hit school here in Chattanooga?
No, actually I went to East Tennessee State University.
Okay.
And I actually got involved in movement work through the 2004 Freedom Ride for Justice, which had a stop in Chattanooga actually. And it was to commemorate the 1964 murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner in Mississippi.
Exactly.
And also to register voters in the 2004 election.
So there have always been white people such as yourself that's been involved for justice.
Sure.
And not often enough do you get the credit for the part that you play. And why do you think that is, Jared? Please.
Well, I think that there a lot of the white folks who've been involved in different struggles have been recognized. I don't think there's a lack of that recognition necessarily.
Janelle, what actually got you involved, and do you think this is something that you're going to continue? You know, because Max has been in a struggle for many, many years. Do you see that this is something that you have to do, you must do, and tell me, how long do you plan to continue?
For the rest of my life, or until we have to stop fighting. One of the two, like once we win, then I'll be done, and I believe we're gonna win. Yeah.
Now, when you were in school, I'm not going to ask you when you graduated. Did you ever think that you would be out here as a concerned citizens for justice at this time in your life?
I think in a way, just being a black woman is revolutionary in and of itself. So I think that always was going to happen. And I think that I've always fought that, but not on a necessarily as organized as with Concerned Citizens for Justice, but it's been the best thing that ever happened to me.
Now, have you seen here, and this is my hometown too, have you seen where the approach that you're using has been a benefit? Are you seeing changes? Do you foresee changes in the future whereby the Concerned Citizens for Justice group will be able to say, these are the changes that we put in focus, and this is the result of it? Because we're actually looking for results now.
We are looking for results, and I think that the process by which we get the results constantly changes. We, of course, are looking towards, our veterans. We're lucky enough to be able to work with Miss Maxine and Lorenzo and Annie, and so we have that experience, but we're also always open to the community, and we believe that people who are, and by we I mean Concerned Citizens for Justice,
yes,
we believe that people who are directly impacted have the best
Aren't
answers.
we all directly impacted to some degree, though?
Well,
in the struggle.
In the struggle. When I say directly impacted people, I mean those that are members of marginalized groups like queer people, black people, women, poor people, those types of people, like people who are actually facing some kind of oppression. And I feel like we, when we come together, we come up with the right solutions, but that changes. And so Concerned Citizens for Justice doesn't feel like there's a specific equation that is going to equal success, other than that we all work together to help liberate one another.
Here's a question again for you, Jared. If not the Concerned Citizens for Justice, what would you be doing?
I've been involved in different struggles for close to about 10 years. So I work in the labor struggle as well. So I would be doing some kind of work for justice if I wasn't working with Concerned Citizens for Justice.
Now, from your seat, Jared, and I'm trying to get into your head too. What do you think about when you see the injustices that are inflicted on different races, and the people that are doing the injustices pretty much look like you? What do you think when that happens?
That's why I do the work. It's my obligation to end it because I benefit from the system, from white supremacy. I benefit from that, so it's my obligation to help end it. That's why I do the work.
Do you see the results of your labor? And if so, in what way?
I think it's it's a long struggle. It's going to take a long time, but I've seen other white people be moved and pulled into the work because I'm doing the work. I think that's important.
Have you asked the question why there's been so many whites that are, as we talked about in the first portion of the show, in the criminal justice system, repealing legislation? Anytime there seems to be a stride towards advancement for African Americans or colored people, there are those who would rather see it reversed. I mean, when that happens among the dinner table at your house, what's the discussion?